What do guys do these days? And ladies, you can listen along too, or think about this group. What do guys do these days when they hang out? It's been a while since I've hung out with guys, actually. And I would be happy to share some of the stories of me hanging out with the guys throughout my life, but I'm a pastor since then, and we are in a church. And as I told you, I have some of the best of them in my life. Oftentimes when guys get together, sometimes nothing good comes of it. Sometimes when guys get together, we tend to talk about sports and other things. Maybe you're thinking about when guys get together, maybe for coffee. Maybe you talk about politics or argue or debate. But how often can you think of a group of guys getting together and talking about Jesus? I can't think of too many instances maybe where that would happen. Maybe in some small group studies in churches, but how often do guys get together and talk about their families, their struggles? How often do guys get together and just talk about Jesus and have a good time doing it? How often do guys get together and tell jokes? That's one of the features, if you ever go on one of these great banquets, we've got this tradition that we tell jokes after our meals. And the rules of these jokes is they have to be clean, funny, and short. And especially on guys' weekends, all three of those criteria get tested. And in fact, I pretty much believe that one of our guys stood up yesterday evening and highly suggested that the women leave the room. That happened in our church. I didn't hear that one, so I'm hoping it was clean, funny, and short. I've heard some of them not funny. No, they've all been funny, but some of them are more short. So these great banquet weekends, it isn't just about us guys getting together and talking about Jesus and having to share our emotions, even though that happens. This is just about guys getting together with other guys and talking about what's life. Talking about what's important. And while doing that, forming a brother, together. And that doesn't happen with guys. I don't have that many guys in my life that I do that. But that happens in a great family, where I form brothers for life. Some of those brothers that now are down there serving on the team, that have now become not just my friends, but my brothers in Christ. What we have been about here this weekend, I'm guessing is pretty. For some reason, these great banquet weekends, you ladies seem to be more willing to come out to these things. We've got a good group forming for our women's weekend coming up in 2 weeks. But for some reason, for us guys, maybe it's just because we're not used to it, or we think we don't need that brotherhood. Fellas, I'm telling you, we need good Christian men that we can be friends with, that we can share our lives with, and that we can talk about what's important in our lives. And I'm not just talking to you all in this room, I'm talking to us as a church too. Because what we are able to provide is space, not just for God's family to form in our midst by the Holy Spirit, but especially for these guys on these men's. Because it's hard when you go out with guys. Like I said, I've been out with the guys, and oftentimes nothing good comes of that. Or nothing productive. But what we do here this weekend is the best time in my life I have ever spent with just a group of people. Just last night, just to kind of give you an insight, we were in here praying. And we do that quite a bit over these weekends. We refer to this not as a sanctuary, but a chapel. And we come in here, mostly to pray. This is our prayer space, and we have communion in here. And last night, I was here about 11:30, and where you all are sitting right there was a circle of us guys, just 6 of us right back there. And everyone had a story to tell. And we were just all talking and sharing, and some of the stories were hard. Some of the stories were, maybe not going to be resolved by anything we talked about last night. But they were all stories that needed to be shared. And that just happened right there in that circle. And that has probably still got some power. There was a powerful circle that was offered up that kind of ended right with you, Debbie, but it might be. But a group of guys right there in a circle, just imagine that, the lights turned down, and we were just there praying, and guess what? We shed a tear or two. We did that. Before Jesus ascended to heaven, he didn't waste time with goodbye. What we read today in Matthew was Jesus' big exit before he ascended to heaven. And you know what he didn't do? He didn't look at his disciples and say, that was fun. Let's do that again sometime. We'll see you later. Jesus didn't say to his disciples, he said, well, you know what? I've given you all I can. You just all go make the most of your lives now. You know what? Jesus didn't hug his disciples like we're going to do in this sanctuary here probably around 4 o'clock. We have a closing ceremony. And when we say goodbye, there's probably going to be some bro hugs happening here in the sanctuary. Got to get that one arm, fist bump. Jesus didn't do that. It's not how he spent his last moments with his disciples. Instead, he gave them a mission. He commissioned them as his goodbye to them. And of course, this goodbye was in his earthly presence. But in saying goodbye to his disciples, he said, here's what I want you to do. And so what I want to talk about for the next few minutes is how is the church supposed to live out the same commission that Jesus gave his disciples on top of the mount that day. And my friends, I will let you know at this point, this is the point I'm going to argue, is that this church is living out Jesus' great. I can't say that for every church, but I am 100% confident that we are beginning to live out Jesus' great commission. We talk about a lot of the mission of the church. We have a mission statement, but this is what Jesus told us to do. And my friends, whether you know it or not, whether you've been a part of it yet or not, except in prayer, which I hope, is that the great banquet is us living out the great. Because what does Jesus say? Well, the first thing Jesus says is that I've been given all the authority on earth and in heaven. That is Jesus' way of reminding us that he is supposed to be the ultimate authority in the church. It's in the letters of Paul, and Paul reminds us that Jesus Christ is the head of the church. The pastor isn't in charge, the session isn't in charge. When it comes to a church, Jesus is in charge. And so Jesus said the first lesson is that the authority in the church, that's it. Here's why we are doing the great banquet. We are not doing the great banquet because I want. We are not doing the great banquet because a group of families in our congregation went on them and wanted to. It's not why we're doing the great banquet. We are doing these great banquet weekends because Jesus Christ wants us. And I know that because he told me. I know that for a fact because he told me. I am standing here today because we are doing the great banquet. Here's a lesson I learned in the ministry. Actually, I'll give Rich credit. I learned this from my friend Rich, who used to be up at Camp Hyoka. Rich was at Camp Hyoka for a long time, and now we have a great new executive director. This is Rich. As Rich said, what his secret in his long ministry is that every 5 years, he sat down and thought about what the next 5 years were. And did he have a purpose, and did he have a reason? But most importantly, did Jesus have him a reason? My 5 years was about a year and a half ago. And so I sat down and I began reflecting. And it just so happens this was shortly after I had gone on my own great banquet, but we hadn't gotten formally planning to do it. And this is what Jesus told me in prayer as I was discerning. And I had a good mentor of mine, Jack Pitzer, who helped me. Jack Pitzer is the one who wrote the great banquet. And this is what Jack and Jesus told me, is that I am meant to do the great banquet as a pastor. Jesus said, I need you to be a part of this great banquet. You know what Jesus added? If it's at your church where you are now, fine. If not, go find another. I did not use that as a bargaining chip. I did not use that to push my own agenda. I'm just telling you what Jesus told me. And I am here, whether y'all like it or not, because guess what? We're doing a great thing. And we're already off to a great start. Because Jesus' call is to this church, too, is I need you all to do this. Not just for you as a church, but for the guests that need to be a part of this. Jesus is the reason we are doing these weekends, because Jesus needs to get a hold of people and to get in their lives. And guess what? I'm blessed that I get to live out this call in this church. I didn't want to leave. But I agreed with Jesus that if we weren't going to do it here, I felt so strongly about being a part of this great banquet that I would be happy. Bye. Notice what Jesus says after reminding his disciples that he was in charge. He said, "Go and make disciples." By that authority, Jesus commissioned his disciples to keep doing what he was doing. You know, that's what Jesus had come to do. He hadn't just come to heal the sick. He hadn't just come to raise the dead. He hadn't just come to die on the cross. He came to make disciples. He came to begin forming his body. And you know what he told his disciples is keep up that. That's the priority he gave. That's the priority he gives the church, is that the church should be about making disciples. The church should not be about spoon-feeding people the gospel on Sunday mornings and wishing them well the rest of their week. The church should not be about catering to the needs that people need to hear on Sunday mornings. The church's mission should be about making people who will go out and serve the Lord in the world, because that's what it is. That's what Jesus wanted the church to do. He didn't want a church that would be served. He wanted a church that would serve, and that is a church that demands the presence of disciples. That is exactly what the great banquet does. That is what the great banquet is intended for. You know, being a disciple simply means, let me put it easier. I don't want to intimidate you being a disciple, because here's what a disciple is all about. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." Light, that you have it, you don't want to hide it under a bushel. Oh no. You want to put it on a stand and let it shine for all the world to see. That's what being a disciple is all about. It is in your life shining the light to others and hoping that they want to catch a spark of what you had to share with them. And that's what I have seen firsthand happen in the Great Banquet. Here's another reason why we're doing the Great Banquet. When I went on my own Great Banquet in 2012, and they pulled out an old picture, so I got a picture of our Great Banquet, Lost Bridge Great Banquet number 76. Able to get in. I drove up, you might not know this story, I wish Jackie was here too. So I'm driving up, I'm going to Great Banquet, kicking and screaming. I'm a Pharisee pastor saying, I want to go. So I'm driving up, it's a 4-hour drive. I go to Decatur, Illinois, it's a 4-hour drive. I'm in the car with Don and who sponsored me and served on my team. And as I'm driving up and, just having a nice, drive with them and talking about stuff, I began thinking, how am I going to tell them on the drive back that what I went through was just a load of crap? Sorry to say crap on Sunday, that offends you, but that was the honest truth, what was in my head. As I went out thinking that this, I'm not going to get anything out of this. And my story is that I went from knowing a lot about Jesus to wanting to have a relationship. I had never experienced that before. I had gone to seminary, I knew mad stuff about Jesus. As I always say, I can read the Bible in Greek. I know a lot of it. I didn't know Jesus in a relationship like I discovered at the Great Banquet. I want to tell you about my friend Chuck. Chuck was about 6'10", bald, real big guy. Pretty shy. He does have a Harley. Gruff. I'm pretty sure he served in the military. Chuck is intimidating presence in a lot of ways. And on Thursday night, Chuck was in my room, and something was going on with Chuck. There was a darkness on Chuck. And I was just talking to him a minute ago. Come to find out he's serving on our team. I told Chuck that he looked like that Thursday night that he was leaving. He was going to leave on Thursday night. And I said, the look I saw on you in the darkness is, I said, I thought you were going to start throwing people so that you could leave. And what Chuck said happened on that Thursday night was that there was just some darkness over him and just a struggle with being a part of that. He said, I've done a lot of things in my life. I just felt overwhelmed by being there that night. And he said, I was thinking of leaving, but instead he went with the assistant lay director, or no, the lay director, who was Jeff, into the chapel, and they prayed all night. And he said, I went back Friday, and I started listening to the talks, and, just still kind of struggling and saying, yeah. And then he began to change, he said. And he began singing the theme song on Saturday, and he began to cry. And then with his table discussion, he began crying some more and opening up about some of the baggage that he was carrying around in his life. And it just so happened that Don Cherry was Chuck's table leader on that week. And by the time he got to the closing ceremony and stood up before all the gathered and talked about his experience, I saw the light shining. And my friends, that is the power, because I saw the darkness in that man's life on Thursday. And by Sunday, he was shining with light. And guess what? It still looks the same down there today. He's serving on our team. This man who was in darkness on Thursday, who was raised to new life on Sunday, just like our Lord and Savior, and he has continued that fire, and he has given a talk this afternoon, and he is helping others catch that light. Because he went through the great banquet just like one of those men down there. That is making disciples. And that is what the world needs the church to be for the world, is to shine that kind of light that Chuck shone. Final thing that Jesus says in his Great Commission is to teach what I have commanded. Teach people to do what I do. I'll have to quote Rudy's talk again. Rudy did a talk last night called Obstacles to Grace. It's sin talk, as it were. And as part of Rudy's talk, Rudy said, the Bible clearly lays it out, gives us 10 commandments that we should try to follow and help us with the whole sin problem. And Rudy said Jesus must have known we were having a really hard time with that, so he decided just to give us 2 to try to pull off. And come to find out we have troubles doing that. But what did Jesus command us to do, and what does Jesus ask us to obey? When Jesus was asked, he said, love the Lord your God with all your mind, all your heart, and all your soul. Love God with everything you've got. Give him your thoughts, give him your emotions, but most of all, give him. And Jesus said, while you're at it, go and love your neighbors. Do you know what happens at the great banquet? Do you know what we talk about mostly? You know what the hope is? Is that people live that out. It takes 15 talks for us to kind of get that into our lives. But really, that is all the great banquet teaches us, is how to love God with our minds, how to love God with our hearts, and then how to live God with our lives, with our actions. That's what we're talking about now today. But most of all, how do we share that love with others? How do we share that love with our families? How do we share that love with our friends? How do we share that love with that stranger on the street? How do we love others more than we have been loving? The commission of the body is still the same as it was on that mountain from which the Lord ascended, to continue the mission of Jesus and make disciples who will shine his light and love. But where we are failing right now, or failing to get our feet, is that's a really large team. And that is somewhat of a waste. That only 5 guys would want to experience the change. kind of ashamed that only 5 guys would want what Chuck discovered in their life. 5 guys would want to be better husbands and friends, Christians and disciples. And that's where we have to challenge ourselves as a church. I'm not asking you all necessarily just to consider, but I'm trying to ask you to think of that person in your life that you know that maybe has stumbled upon some darkness. You know what? You have an opportunity as a church to offer them a way of being resurrected. Or that person in your life that maybe just you'd like to see, have a 3-day vacation as if they've never imagined. We need more people experience it. And you know what? I quit caring whether it's church members or not. Because as a church, we are still making disciples. The requirement wasn't make members of your church. Instead, it is make disciples. So I will take anyone I can get because I want to offer them the love of Jesus and the life in this way. Because that's why I'm still standing. May we, as with Christ as our true head of this church, strive to be such disciples as we are becoming by continuing to help Him make disciples that the world needs, that will go shine a light, for there are a lot of dark places, there are a lot of people struggling, there are a lot of Chucks in the world, and my friends, Jesus can change lives through us. All it takes for us is to continue living out what is referred to as the Great Commission, which is doing great things in and through this church, all because Jesus is that good, not us. This is not us doing it. This is Jesus making disciples for Himself. A brotherhood, a sisterhood, a body that the world